Umkonde presents Kizito Mihigo, A Stolen Life and Everlasting Legacy. 1. Holy Grounds. On July 25, 1981, 4 months before the apparitions of the Virgin Mary placed Kibeho on the world map, a baby boy was born in Rwanda, in that small town of Gikongoro, in the household of Augustin Buguzi, headmaster, and Iribagiza Placidi, a teacher at the same primary school. The devout Catholic couple called their third child and first son Kizito, the name of one of the martyrs of Uganda, and Mihigo, the name of his grandfather. 2. Musical prodigy. Kizito's passion for music was revealed at a very young age. Before he was even 10 years old, he was already writing and composing religious songs to the delight of his family and his parish. When the war started in October 1990, Kizito was 9 years old and completely clueless about what was going on. All he recollected from those days is that his father became more pensive and spent more time at church praying for his country. 3. Genocide. In April 1994, when the genocide started in Rwanda, his father, Augustin Buguzi, sent his wife and kids to a neighboring parish, Karama in Runyinya district. Kizito's father stayed behind with his elderly mother, Kizito's grandmother, as she could not make the journey. Their stay in Karama was nightmarish. The makeshift refuge was under constant attacks and bodies were piling up all around the room where they were hiding. After a couple of weeks, Kizito was separated from his mother and siblings during a violent attack. The teenager walked with the crowds fleeing to Burundi, not knowing if he would ever see his family again. 4. A Time to Kill. Kizito was miraculously reunited with his mother and brother and sisters in the weeks that followed his arrival in Burundi. In July 1994, the family went back to what was left of their country and Kibeho. Almost everyone who had found refuge in the school and the church, including his father, was killed. Mid-April 1994, Kibeho's historical church was burned to the ground with people inside. Kizito was filled with rage and was intent on avenging his father. He tried to join the new army as a child soldier, but his uncle admonished him, and instead he was enrolled back in school. 5. A Time to Heal. After completing his primary school in 1995, Kizito joined the seminary Virgo Fidelis of Karubanda in Butare, not so much to become a priest, but because of a promise he had made to his late father. In Karubanda, Kizito found solace in karate, music, and prayer. His rage and hatred gradually dissipated, and 14 years old Kizito composed dozens of liturgical songs that were soon played in all the churches of the country. In his second year, he created a choir, and by the time he finished high school, he had written more than 200 original songs in the most beautiful and purest form of Kinyarwanda. 6. Higher Learning. In 2001, after participating in a competition to compose the country's new national anthem, 19 years old Kizito was offered a scholarship to study at the Music Academy Cours Saint-Étienne in Belgium for a year. He later enrolled in the renowned Music Conservatory of Paris, from which he graduated in 2008. Over the years, Kizito had found closure with the events that claimed his father and claimed the lives of thousands of innocent souls. In 2010, he created the Kizito Mihigo Peace Foundation, KMP, and when he returned home in 2011, he toured schools and prisons to talk about reconciliation. 7. Advocacy. In 2012, Kizito started broadcasting a weekly television show called Umusanzu w'Umuhanzi, which means the artist's contribution, in which guests of different faith and religious beliefs discussed about peace building, forgiveness, and reconciliation. His music had also matured and expanded beyond religion to include more engaged songs. In 2009, his song Twanze Gutoberwa Amateka, Do Not Weaponize Our History, in which he denounces the misuse of the genocide and history's tragedies to separate Rwandese, became an instant hit, making him one of the country's most prominent artists. 8. Crime of humanity. His messages were unfortunately not to the liking of everyone. Ijoro cy'urupfu, the meaning of death, in which he boldly shows compassion for both the victims of genocide and the victims of revenge killings and their families, was banned across the territory in the hours that followed its release in March 2014. For several days, Kizito mysteriously disappeared from the public eye, only to reappear 1 week after the 20th commemoration of the genocide that claimed his father, in police custody and handcuffed. 9. Twists and turns. In one of the strangest and highest profile court cases in Rwanda's history, the artist and activist was tried for terrorism and conspiracy against the government. He was condemned to 10 years in prison. On September 15, 2018, in an unexpected turn of events, Kizito benefited from what was called a presidential pardon and was released after 4 years in the infamous Mageragere prison. Amongst the 2,000 other prisoners liberated that day was Rwanda's opposition leader, Victoire Ingabire, who had spent 8 years behind bars after a equally spectacular trial. 10. A long-awaited return. Kizito never uttered a word about the case that cost him 4 years of his freedom. Instead, he tried to rebuild his life doing what he loved the most, music. In November 2018, on the 37th anniversary of the apparitions of the Virgin Mary, Kizito performed a concert in his native Kibeho before hundreds of fans, most of whom had traveled miles to come and see their beloved hero. It was a triumph. While the public unconditionally embraced his return to the scene, the government-owned media boycotted all his songs. 11. Open-air prison. In December 2018, the National Police unceremoniously informed Kizito that his foundation was closed and he was forbidden to ever use the name KMP again or conduct any activities related to peace building or reconciliation. The ultimate stab in the back came from his fellow genocide survivors. In April 2019, the organizers of the 25th genocide commemoration refused to feature Kizito in the official ceremonies, a devastating blow to a surviving orphan of the 1994 atrocities. 12. Solitude. Determined not to be discouraged by his circumstances, Kizito immersed himself in work, investing all his time teaching youth at his musical academy and writing powerful songs which all became instant hits. Though he did his best to hide it, his life in Rwanda had become unbearable. The authorities were surveying all his moves, and almost everyone he knew avoided him, too afraid to pay the price for being seen with the one they now saw as an outcast. Kizito confided in his close friends that he wanted to leave the country. In the greatest of secrets, he sought help from foreign embassies in Kigali, but none of them came to his rescue. 13. The unforgettable hours. In the wee hours of February 13, 2020, a frightening rumor inflamed social networks, and news confirmed the next day by RIB, the Rwanda Investigative Bureau, via Twitter. Kizito was arrested in Nyaruguru, his native district in southern Rwanda, as he was alleged to be trying to cross to Burundi. When we heard the criminal charges against Kizito, attempting to illegally cross to Burundi, joining terrorist groups and corruption, we started to fear the worst. And we were right. Kizito was never seen alive again. 14. Shockwave. On February 17, 2020, a letter from the police alleging that Kizito had committed suicide in his cell was leaked on social networks, but the public rejected that oh so convenient narrative, despite the trolls harassing anyone who questioned the suspicious death. The words "Kizito was murdered" popped up everywhere and rapidly quashed the official version. Several international personalities, including author Patrick Mbeko and former Governor General of Canada, Michael Jean, as well as various human rights organizations in the world, joined Rwandans to call for an autopsy and an independent inquiry into Kizito's death. But the Rwandan authorities turned a deaf ear to all the requests and defiantly declared the case closed. 15. Bigger than life. In the hours following the announcement of his death, Kizito's story, his music, his persecution, and his tragic end made the front pages of prominent media around the world, from South Africa to Germany, Belgium, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Canada, Ivory Coast, France, Kenya, Nigeria, Uganda, Netherlands, United Kingdom, DRC, Senegal, Switzerland, Zimbabwe, and even Slovakia, where we never knew they had even heard of the Rwandan singer. His hit song, Ijoro cy'urupfu, the one that sent him to prison in 2014, was played in TV and radio broadcasts worldwide. 16. A royal send-off. On February 22, 2020, despite the fear of facing reprisals for attending his funeral, hundreds of Rwandans joined his mother to pay their last respects to the 38-year-old singer and peace activist who called for the recognition and commemoration of all victims of atrocities regardless of their ethnicity. The diaspora, from Mozambique to Belgium, France, Canada, and the US, organized tributes, a collective recognition of an ordinary citizen, and a rebuke of the authorities never seen before in our history. No officials attended any of the events. 17. Rising from the dead. Confidence of Kizito stunned the world with the surprise release of recordings secretly taped in prison between 2014 and 2018 and sent overseas to be made public in the event of his death. In a methodical way and with a poised voice, Kizito gave details of the pressure, the physical torture, and his illegal detention prior to his 2014 trial. To this day, none of the high-ranking officials, members of government, the police, the army, Ibuka, or the ruling party mentioned by Kizito has ever refuted the singer's account or disputed the authenticity of the recordings. 18. The secret manuscript. The recordings were not the only historical records left behind by Kizito. His posthumous memoirs, written in prison and completed shortly before he was killed, hit the bookstores 2 months after his death. Rwanda, Embracing Reconciliation to Live in Peace and Die Happy, tells us about Kizito's childhood, surviving the genocide, his struggle with grief and anger, the meaning of his songs, the values he lived by: peace, reconciliation, forgiveness, compassion, tolerance, love, human dignity, non-violence and unity, and his estrangement from the regime. 19. We are Kizito. In September 2020, Kizito was the first ever posthumous awardee of the prestigious Václav Havel International Prize for Creative Dissent in the awards history. 2 years after his abrupt death, Kizito's songs have received millions of views. His book is a bestseller, and testimonials of people touched by the gospel singer turned activist continue to surface. Kizito Mihigo is considered a true Intwari, a hero, for dedicating his life to uplifting others and never abandoning his principles till the very end, a saint for his message of peace, and a martyr for the way the regime persecuted him and ultimately took his life. 20. This is not the end. Though our society has started changing since Kizito's death, with an increasing number of young people fearlessly speaking up to denounce injustices and discriminations, Kizito's story is not ending here. Not yet. The end will be written when all those who betrayed, persecuted, and tortured Kizito and the architects of his death face justice, and when our messengers will live freely and have the right to share their messages of peace, love, and unity without any fear of persecution, murder, or enforced disappearances. And now Kizito Mihigo in his own words. As long as I do not yet have the right and freedom to express myself, either in public or in private, without control, without restriction, or without censorship, as long as I'm put on trial or isolated anytime I criticize the regime, as long as I live under pressure and in permanent danger of dying, I will never be proud to be called a Rwandese, and I will have to relentlessly pursue my mission. My dream is that my mission will end one day. On that day, the world will have become humane and peaceful. I will no longer need to teach forgiveness because all humans will have become merciful. I will no longer be obliged to recall the need for human rights and fundamental freedoms because the whole world will have become compassionate, and the commandment of loving our neighbors, to never do to others what we would not like to be done to us, will have become our constitution. Unfortunately, that day still seems very far. Kizito.